When my grandfather started, when he started his own life, he went to the Navy right after World War II, and when he returned, he met my grandmother Helen, and they began to date and what have you. And eventually, they had a family, and this is only 6 of their children, but there was eventually 8. And that's a picture of my dad right there, who I need to call. It's his birthday. I haven't done that. And a picture of my uncle Anthony, who I'm named after, and my aunts, and my grandma and my tata, or my grandma and grandpa. And as my grandpa and my grandma were growing up, one of the first jobs that my grandfather got, and where he was able to have a steady income, and he didn't have to worry about where the money was coming for food or for rent or for electricity, was working with a group called the Community Service Organization. He did a lot of this work in the Bay Area, in the Fremont area, in a little community known as Dakota. He also worked in San Jose in a community known as Sal Si Puedes, or Get Out If You Can. And this is where he began to learn about the beauty and the simplicity of these 3 words that this organization was based on. Community, service, and organizing, right? Organization. And so he learned about the importance of community and the importance of, again, sharing. Simple kindergarten lesson that I remind everybody of, and nobody seems to forget. Sharing is caring, right? Mm-hmm. Right? We laugh, right? But it's that simple. And so, again, what does that mean? That means sharing a little bit of your time, sharing a little bit of your energy, sharing a little bit of your resources, sharing a little bit of yourself, right? And that shows that you care. And so you do that by talking with people and by listening to them. And not just listening to the words, but learning, not just with your ears and just to the words, but really listening to, where that person's speaking from, and learning how to listen from a more central place, maybe your heart, if you want to call it that. And when you do this, when you listen and when you share and when you storytell with other people, you start to find all these little common bonds and these little common unities, right? Or communities, right? Things that bring us together. And eventually you realize in doing all this talking and learning about one another, you start to find out about things you care about and things that you have a mutual concern about, right? And so you organize together, right? And you start doing something to help each other out if you're in this dialogue with each other. Right? Asking questions, sharing a little bit. And eventually you find out that when you're in service to the larger community, organizing for each other's well-being, not just, making sure that you take care of, your own little piece of the block, which is your little house that you have gated off from your neighbors, but making sure that you see to it that your whole street is cleaned up, and that all the kids on your street are succeeding, just as well as your own family. And so that's where my grandfather learned about the importance of these, fundamentals, about these simple elements in our daily life. And so he started to say, something had to be done for the farm workers. That was my experience, right? Martin Luther King Jr. experienced racism in the South, and he said, I don't ever want any other kids to deal with that again. And so he changed, his way of being, and he went out and he did something about that. And, and that's what's important is through what we experience, and where we place our interest and in how we use our time, that really shapes us and that helps us to be who we want to be in this world and to see the kind of world that we want to have and share with everyone around us. And so again, my grandfather having these experiences of being a farm worker, learning about organizing, learning about community, he said, we need to do something for the farm workers. And everybody just said, you're crazy, Cesar, you can't do it. People have tried it for 100 years with a lot more resources, with better educations, and look at you. You're just, you're a small brown farm worker, What makes you think you're going to do it, right? And so that was kind of what, my grandfather started off with. And he had his own doubts too. He never thought, like, I'm going to, succeed, because that would have been almost, foolish. It was 100 or more years of history that he was working against, but he just said that something had to be done. Because if I didn't do something, and if I didn't use my life for something, then who else was going to do something, right? If somebody doesn't stand up and say something, then who's going to do it? And so that's kind of when he jumped out there, and that's when a lot of people know him for this work that we'll watch here. This is where he really got, famous, I guess you want to call it, is doing his work organizing farm workers. And so here's some scenes.
You're not afraid. If this is what it takes to build a union, a free and democratic union.
America had never seen a man like Cesar Chavez.
What side are you on?
A migrant farm worker who believed he could change the world.
Automatically think about public.
A humble man with little schooling who spoke of justice.
The first conference in Delano 3 years ago, we were alone.
A man of peace, faith, and determination, fighting against powerful forces.
We thought that it could be done.
Fighting greed and violence and injustice.
It's a big, damn plan to come and beat the hell out of us.
He aroused the deepest passions. His spirit touched the lives of all around him. He was a great man who cared for our nation's most forgotten population, an exemplary civil rights and labor leader, a man America will never forget.
Thank you, Martin Sheen. We don't need you to steal my presentation, right? Now, Martin Sheen's a really good supporter of the farm workers. When I was at that March for World Peace and Nonviolence, he was there. And whenever, the farm workers are working on their issues, Martin Sheen's there. And so that's why he was kind enough to share his voice and helping to share some of the story that I'm sharing with you guys right now. And, what he goes on to talk about later on in the movie is how when the grape strike began, it was actually started by Filipino-American farm workers. And they're the ones who started the Delano grape strike. And then the next day, my grandfather, who was organizing a lot of primarily the Latino, the Mexican farm workers, said, we need to join them. We need to do this in solidarity. Because workers' rights are civil rights, and civil rights are human rights. And we're doing this for the sake of humanity, and for how humans need to treat one another. And humans who do hard work for the other person. And so what happened was, right away my grandfather made them join the Filipino workers. And he said, we have to work together and we have to include everybody. And there were still remnants of some of the Okies from the Dust Bowl. There were still some African Americans that came from the South. And so all these people worked together on behalf of the farm workers because they all experienced that life, and they knew that if they didn't come together, that they couldn't accomplish what they wanted to achieve on the behalf of all farm workers. And my grandfather reminded them, though, and these are some lessons that he learned from Gandhi and from Martin Luther King Jr. in the South, is that when we do this, we have to do it nonviolently. Because anytime you do anything with force, whenever you try to, move somebody by pushing them around, there's always some leftover tension, and there's resentment, and there's anger, and that doesn't allow for any real lasting peace. And so that's why my grandfather reminded them, we have to remain nonviolent. Even if they want to abuse us, we can't strike back. We have to show them how much we care about life, and so much so that we're willing to sacrifice our own life, and so much so that we won't even hit another person if they hit us. And that takes a lot, Not everybody was perfect, I'm saying, Maybe some people probably did strike back. But it took a lot to try to commit yourself to that sort of a vision. And that's what my grandfather helped, the farm workers with.